The wooden door had been locked for 13 years. Yet on that autumn morning in 1992, a golden light spilled from beneath it, a light that had no source, no explanation, no right to exist in the abandoned east wing of Santa Vita Monastery. Brother Florian stood frozen in the corridor, his weathered hands trembling as they clutched the iron key. At 38, his face had grown gaunt from years of solitude, his eyes hollow from searching shadows for answers that never came. The light pulsed gently, beckoning him forward, illuminating dust motes that danced in the cold air. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice echoing through the empty hallway. The East Wing had been sealed since that day, since Pentecost, 1979, when 7 brothers of the Capuchin order had vanished before a congregation of witnesses. No one had entered this prayer room in 13 years. No one could have. Brother Florian slid the ancient key into the lock. The mechanism yielded with reluctance, as though time itself had rusted its gears. The door swung inward, revealing a sight that stole his breath. 7 monks' robes lay perfectly folded on the stone altar. Brown woolen habits, arranged in a perfect circle, each accompanied by a rope belt and sandals, preserved as though they had been placed there moments ago, not years. No dust, no decay, no sign that time had touched them at all. His mind flashed back to that terrible morning in 1979, the blinding light that had filled the chapel during the Pentecost service, the screams of the congregation as the 7 monks seemed to dissolve before their eyes, the smell of ozone and incense mingling in the air. What Brother Florian discovered in that locked room would unravel a mystery that had consumed him for 13 years, revealing a truth so profound it would forever blur the boundaries between faith and the unexplainable. If you enjoy fictional mysteries like this one, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Now let's begin our journey into one of the most perplexing disappearances ever documented. Santa Vita Monastery had stood on its windswept hill for over 4 centuries, weathering wars, plagues, and the slow erosion of faith in the modern world. Its stone walls rose from the mist like a memory of another time, its bell tower piercing the sky as if reaching for heaven itself. To the small village nestled in the valley below, the monastery was both guardian and enigma, a place of reverence and whispered stories. In the spring of 1979, Brother Florian was a young novice of 25, still new to the monastery's rhythms and rituals. His decision to join the order had come after years of spiritual searching, drawn to the Capuchin monks' dedication to simplicity and contemplation. Their brown habits and humble demeanor belied the deep currents of mysticism that ran through their ancient traditions. The monastery was home to 23 monks, but 7 senior brothers formed an inner circle that maintained traditions dating back to the order's origins. These 7, brothers Matteo, Luca, Dominic, Thomas, Vincent, Gabriel, and Jerome, were distinct even among the ascetic community. They kept longer hours of prayer, observed additional fasts, and often gathered in private council with Father Silvano, the elderly abbot whose stooped frame and piercing gaze commanded both respect and unease. "Brother Florian, you're daydreaming again," Father Silvano's voice cut through the young novice's thoughts as they prepared the chapel for Pentecost. "The candles must be arranged precisely. The descent of the Holy Spirit is not a matter for carelessness." "Yes, Father," Florian replied, adjusting the beeswax candles. "I was just wondering about the special vessels Brother Matteo brought from the reliquary. I've never seen them used before." Father Silvano's expression tightened. "Some traditions are revealed only when necessary. Pentecost this year has special significance." The abbot walked away, leaving Florian puzzled. Over the previous weeks, he had noticed unusual preparations throughout the monastery. Ancient texts had been retrieved from the library's restricted section. The 7 senior monks had withdrawn for extended periods of prayer and fasting. Hushed conversations ceased whenever Florian approached. One evening, while delivering manuscripts to the library, he overheard brothers Matteo and Vincent speaking in urgent tones. "The alignment is precise this year," Brother Matteo whispered. "It may be our only chance in this lifetime." "But the risk," Brother Vincent began. "We took vows to uphold the ancient covenant," Matteo interrupted. "The threshold will open at Pentecost, and we must be ready to cross." Their conversation ended abruptly when they noticed Florian. The young novice pretended not to have heard, but the words lingered in his mind, mysterious and troubling. 3 days before Pentecost, a woman named Margot arrived at the monastery. At 30, she carried herself with quiet dignity, her dark hair streaked with premature gray. She requested a private meeting with Brother Luca, the youngest of the 7 senior monks. Florian escorted her to the garden where Brother Luca waited. They know each other, Florian realized, watching their restrained but emotional greeting from a distance. Though they maintained proper decorum, their faces betrayed a deeper connection. Brother Luca took her hands briefly, speaking in hushed tones that carried an urgency Florian couldn't decipher. Later, Brother Luca appeared distracted during evening prayers, his normally serene expression troubled. When Florian encountered him in the bell tower at midnight, staring at the stars, the senior monk spoke unprompted. "Do you ever wonder, Brother Florian, if our vows might ask too much of us? If the sacrifice might be greater than we understood when we made our promises?" Before Florian could respond, Brother Luca smiled sadly. "The path is chosen. We follow it to its end, wherever it leads." He pressed something into Florian's hand, a small wooden crucifix on a cord. "Keep this. Perhaps you'll return it to me someday." The morning of Pentecost dawned clear and unusually warm. The monastery buzzed with activity as villagers made their way up the winding path for the special service. Florian noticed the 7 senior monks gathering in the chapter house before dawn, their faces solemn, as Father Silvano addressed them. The elderly abbot looked both fearful and resolved, his hands trembling as he offered a blessing. By mid-morning, the chapel was filled to capacity. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor. The air was heavy with incense and anticipation. Florian assisted with preparations, noting that the 7 senior monks wore newly made habits of unusually fine wool, each bearing subtle embroidered symbols at the hem that he had never seen before. Father Silvano's eyes met Florian's briefly as the young novice took his place. "Whatever happens today," the abbot whispered, "remember that faith sometimes requires us to accept mysteries beyond our understanding." The congregation settled into reverent silence as the service began, unaware that they were about to witness an event that would haunt them for years to come. The Pentecost service progressed with solemn grandeur. Candles flickered in the draft from the high windows, sending shadows dancing across the chapel walls. The monks' voices rose in ancient Gregorian chants, the Latin phrases echoing through the vaulted ceiling. Villagers and pilgrims sat in hushed reverence, many closing their eyes in prayer as the familiar liturgy washed over them. Father Silvano stood at the altar, his weathered hands raising the ornate chalice that was used only on the most sacred occasions. Behind him, the 7 senior monks formed a perfect semicircle, their hoods drawn forward, faces partially obscured in shadow. "Veni, Sancte Spiritus," Father Silvano intoned, "Come, Holy Spirit." As if responding to his invocation, a beam of sunlight broke through the rose window above the altar, illuminating the 7 monks in golden light. Brother Florian, watching from his position near the chapel entrance, felt a strange pressure building in the air, as if the atmosphere itself was becoming dense with expectation. The 7 monks stepped forward in unison, forming a tighter circle. Brother Matteo produced an ancient leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. Brother Luca removed from his habit a small crystal vial containing what appeared to be clear oil. The other brothers each revealed similar ritual objects: a silver bell, a brass censer, an alabaster box, a carved wooden staff, and a small stone bowl. Their voices joined in a chant that was not part of the traditional service, words in a language Florian didn't recognize, older than Latin, with rhythms that seemed to resonate with the stone walls themselves. Father Silvano's expression shifted from reverence to concern as the monks' chanting intensified. Florian noticed the abbot take a step backward, clutching his crucifix tightly. In the congregation, several people stirred uncomfortably, exchanging confused glances. Brother Matteo opened the ancient book to a marked page. The 7 monks placed their ritual objects in the center of their circle, then joined hands. Their chanting grew louder, more insistent, the strange words echoing with increasing urgency. Then came the moment that would be described differently by every witness, yet remembered with perfect clarity by all. A sound like rushing wind filled the chapel, though no doors had opened. The candles flared suddenly, their flames stretching unnaturally tall. The air between the 7 monks began to shimmer, as if the fabric of reality itself was thinning. A blinding light erupted from the center of their circle, not the warm gold of sunlight, but a piercing blue-white radiance that forced many in the congregation to shield their eyes. Those who managed to keep watching would later describe seeing the monks' forms becoming transparent, as if they were being dissolved from within by the light. Brother Luca's face turned toward the congregation in the final moment. His eyes found Margot in the crowd, a look of profound regret and determination crossing his features before the light consumed him completely. A thunderous crack shook the chapel, rattling the windows in their frames. When the light vanished an instant later, the circle stood empty. The 7 monks had disappeared, leaving behind only their ritual objects arranged on the stone floor. Silence held for 3 heartbeats before chaos erupted. "Mother of God!" a woman screamed from the front pew. Others jumped to their feet, some making the sign of the cross, others backing toward the exits. "They're gone!" someone shouted. "They vanished into thin air!" Father Silvano stood frozen at the altar, his face ashen. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "It is done," he whispered, then collapsed to his knees. Brother Florian pushed through the panicking crowd, reaching the empty circle where the monks had stood. The stone floor was cool to the touch, showing no sign of heat or disturbance. The ritual objects remained precisely arranged, untouched by whatever force had taken their owners. Margot pushed forward, her face drained of color. "Luca," she whispered, reaching the spot where he had stood. Her hand hovered over the empty air, trembling. When she turned to Father Silvano, her voice was steel. You knew this would happen." The abbot couldn't meet her gaze. "We should clear the chapel," he said instead, addressing the other monks who stood in shocked silence. "Brother Florian, please help escort everyone outside." Within the hour, the monastery grounds were in turmoil. Monks and villagers searched every building, every courtyard and garden. Brother Florian joined a group checking the catacombs beneath the chapel, their flashlight beams cutting through centuries of darkness, finding nothing but ancient tombs and silence. By late afternoon, Sheriff Rowan arrived from the village, his deputy in tow. A broad-shouldered man with a perpetually skeptical expression, Sheriff Rowan had little patience for what he called religious hysteria. "People don't just disappear," he stated flatly, after interviewing several witnesses in the abbot's study. 7 grown men don't vanish into thin air. There's a rational explanation. "There were 63 witnesses," Father Silvano replied quietly. "All saw the same thing." "Mass hallucination," the sheriff countered. "Some kind of hypnosis or suggestion. Or maybe a clever magic trick, secret passages, smoke, and mirrors." "Search wherever you wish," the abbot said. You'll find no tunnels, no hidden rooms. Santa Vita has held no secrets from me in the 40 years I've served as abbot. But as Florian would later discover, some secrets had remained hidden even from Father Silvano, or perhaps especially from him. The days following the disappearance blended into a blur of questioning, searching, and growing unease. Sheriff Rowan's initial confidence gave way to frustration as his investigation yielded no rational explanation. The monastery was examined room by room, stone by stone. The chapel floor was inspected for trapdoors or hidden mechanisms. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in to search for tunnels. Nothing was found. The witnesses were interviewed repeatedly, their accounts scrutinized for inconsistencies. Though details varied, some recalled a blue light, others white. Some remembered a sound like thunder, others like rushing water. The core event remained consistent in every telling. 7 monks had stood in a circle, surrounded by light, and then they were gone. 1 week after the disappearance, Margot approached Brother Florian as he tended the monastery garden. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her composed demeanor now fragile as thin glass. "Brother Luca is my younger brother," she confessed, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "Our family name is Ricci. He joined the order 8 years ago after our parents died. We were all each other had left in the world." Florian's surprise must have shown on his face. "He was allowed family visits twice yearly," she continued. "We kept it private. He didn't want special treatment from the other monks, but he wrote to me every week." She withdrew a bundle of letters from her bag. His last letter came 3 days before Pentecost. He knew something was going to happen. The letter, written in Brother Luca's neat script, contained cryptic references to the threshold and the crossing that echoed the conversation Florian had overheard between brothers Matteo and Vincent. "I've made my peace with what must come," Luca had written. "The 7 of us have been preparing for this moment since we joined the order. It is both our burden and our privilege. If all goes as intended, I may not see you again in this life. Know that I go willingly, though not without regret for the pain my absence will cause you." Sheriff Rowan dismissed the letter as evidence of a planned disappearance. Perhaps the monks had arranged to leave the order and start new lives elsewhere. But this theory couldn't explain how they had vanished before dozens of witnesses, nor why they would abandon their lives so dramatically. As the investigation continued, divisions emerged among the witnesses. Some embraced supernatural explanations, claiming the monks had been taken up to heaven like Elijah in the Bible. Others insisted there must be a rational explanation yet to be discovered. Arguments broke out in the village. Friendships fractured along lines of belief and skepticism. Meanwhile, Father Silvano grew increasingly withdrawn. His health, already fragile, deteriorated rapidly. He spent hours alone in prayer, eating little, sleeping less. When he did speak, his words were often disconnected, referring to ancient prophecies and the thinning of the veil. Brother Florian, driven by a need to understand, began his own quiet investigation. Using his position as the monastery's assistant librarian, he gained access to texts normally restricted to senior monks. Late at night, by candlelight, he pored over manuscripts describing the Capuchin order's history and esoteric traditions. In a volume dating from the 16th century, he found references to a secret fellowship within the order, guardians of knowledge deemed too dangerous or profound for general awareness. According to these texts, certain members were chosen to serve as vessels, or bridges, between the physical world and what was described as the realm beyond the threshold. The most troubling discovery came in Father Silvano's private quarters. While helping to organize the abbot's medicines, Florian found a journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The journal contained entries spanning decades, documenting Father Silvano's involvement with what he called the Covenant of the Threshold. "They have been chosen," one entry read, dated 3 years before the disappearance. "The 7, who will make the crossing when the cycle completes. I have guided their preparation, though my heart is heavy with the knowledge of what awaits them. The texts are unclear whether those who cross ever return in their original form. Some passages suggest a transformation, others speak of dissolution. I pray I have not led these good men to their destruction. Before Florian could read further, the monastery was thrown into crisis by news coverage of the disappearance. A journalist from a national newspaper had published an article titled, "The Vanishing Monks of Santa Vita, Miracle or Elaborate Hoax." The story attracted attention from around the country. Camera crews and reporters descended on the village, transforming the peaceful community into a circus of speculation. Some monks welcomed the attention, seeing it as an opportunity to share their faith. Others, including Florian, feared the sensationalism would distort what had happened and dishonor the missing brothers. The monastery's daily rhythms, centered around prayer and contemplation, became impossible to maintain. 3 months after the disappearance, Father Silvano suffered a stroke. As he lay dying, he called for Brother Florian. "The cycle," the abbot whispered, his voice thin and strained. 49 years, the threshold opens, then closes. When it opens again, they may return. You must be ready. You must... His voice faltered. "Ready for what, Father?" Florian pressed, leaning closer. "The choice. They will have a choice." The abbot's breathing became labored. "In my chamber, behind the icon of St. Francis, instructions. Protect them. When the time comes..." Those were his final words. Father Silvano died that night, taking with him knowledge that might have explained the mystery. After the abbot's death, leadership of Santa Vita passed to Father Gregory, a pragmatic man with little patience for mysticism. Under his guidance, the monastery attempted to return to normalcy, treating the disappearance as a tragedy to be mourned rather than a mystery to be solved. Gradually, the media attention faded. The village settled back into its routines, though conversations still hushed when the subject of the 7 monks arose. Sheriff Rowan filed his final report, listing the case as unresolved, rather than admitting to a supernatural event. Margot remained in the village, taking a position as the local school's librarian. Each week she visited the monastery to light candles for her brother and the other missing monks. Sometimes she and Florian would talk, sharing memories of Brother Luca and speculating about his fate. Years passed. The monastery's population dwindled as elderly monks died, and few novices arrived to replace them. By 1988, only 12 monks remained, and parts of the vast complex were closed to conserve heating and maintenance costs. The East Wing, including the prayer room where the 7 had prepared for their final ritual, was sealed off entirely. When Father Gregory died in 1990, no successor was appointed. The diocese discussed closing Santa Vita altogether, but Brother Florian, now the senior monk, petitioned to keep it open as a place of retreat and prayer. He was permitted to remain as caretaker, along with the 4 other monks who chose to stay. Through it all, Florian continued his research. Following Father Silvano's instructions, he had found a hidden compartment behind the icon in the abbot's chamber, containing a slim volume bound in faded red leather. The text was written in a cipher that took him years to decode, working in secret during the night hours when the monastery slept. As the 13th anniversary of the disappearance approached, Florian began to understand the pattern described in the ancient text. The cycle of 49 referred to a celestial alignment that occurred every 49 years. According to the manuscript, this alignment created a thinning between dimensions, allowing passage between worlds for those properly prepared. If the text was correct, the 7 monks had not died but had crossed into another realm of existence. And if Father Silvano's final words were true, they might return, or at least make contact, when the next significant date in the cycle arrived. That date, Florian calculated, would be exactly 13 years after their disappearance, Pentecost, 1992. If this story has kept you entertained, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more mysteries. What do you think happened to the 7 monks? Share your theories below. Santa Vita Monastery in 1992 was a shadow of its former self. Ivy crept unchecked across crumbling walls, and moss cushioned the stones of pathways once kept meticulously clean. The gardens where generations of monks had grown herbs and vegetables lay mostly fallow, with only a small patch still cultivated for Brother Florian's simple needs. Of the 5 monks who had remained in 1990, only Florian still lived at Santa Vita. Brother Thomas had died peacefully in his sleep. Brothers Michael and Peter had transferred to a larger monastery in the city, finding the isolation and decay of Santa Vita too oppressive. Brother Joseph had left the order entirely, a decision that came after weeks of disturbed sleep and claims of hearing voices in the sealed East Wing. Florian's daily routine had evolved to maintain the essential functions of the monastery with minimal resources. He rose before dawn for private prayers, maintained the small chapel where locals still came for Sunday services, and tended to basic repairs as best he could. The diocese sent monthly stipends for upkeep, though these were barely sufficient to keep the roof from leaking and the electricity running. Despite the hardships, Florian found purpose in his role as guardian of Santa Vita's legacy and its secrets. Each day he walked the perimeter of the monastery, checking the seals on doors that had been closed for years. Each night he added to his journals, documenting his ongoing research into the disappearance and the cosmic cycle that might explain it. In early 1992, 2 visitors arrived who would alter the course of Florian's solitary existence. The first was Professor Alistair Hayes, a historian specializing in religious movements and mystical traditions. Tall and gaunt, with wire-rimmed glasses and perpetually ink-stained fingers, Hayes approached Florian with an academic interest in the disappearance. "I've been studying similar cases," the professor explained, as they walked the monastery grounds. "Instances throughout history where individuals or groups have reportedly vanished in religious contexts. The Pentecost disappearance, as it's called in academic circles, is one of the best documented." "You mean one of the least explained?" Florian replied. Hayes smiled thinly. "Precisely why it interests me. Most such cases dissolve under scrutiny, proven hoaxes or exaggerations. But this one, 63 witnesses, physical evidence in the form of abandoned ritual objects, and a complete absence of any satisfactory explanation, natural or supernatural." Initially cautious, Florian found in Hayes a kindred spirit, someone driven by genuine curiosity rather than sensationalism. The professor requested permission to stay at the monastery for several months, using its library for research. Florian agreed, grateful for both the company and the potential insights. The second visitor arrived unannounced on a rainy March evening. Florian opened the monastery gates to find Margot standing there, her hair now fully gray, though she was only 43. She had left the village 5 years earlier, moving to the city for a position at a university library. "I couldn't stay away," she said simply. "Not this year." She too requested lodging at the monastery, explaining that she had taken a sabbatical from her position. Florian arranged quarters for her in what had once been the visitors' wing, now mostly unused. With May approaching, the 13th anniversary of the disappearance loomed large in all their minds. Florian shared with Hayes and Margot the basics of his research, the 49-year cycle, the possibility of dimensional crossing, though he kept certain details to himself, unsure how much they should know. As Pentecost drew closer, strange phenomena began to manifest throughout the monastery. Electrical systems fluctuated without explanation, lights flickering or burning unusually bright. Objects moved between rooms when no one was present. The temperature in certain areas, particularly near the sealed east wing, dropped precipitously without apparent cause. Most disturbing were the sounds, whispers that seemed to emanate from empty rooms, chanting that echoed through corridors in the dead of night, the clear toll of a bell when the bell tower had been empty for years. Professor Hayes documented each occurrence meticulously, setting up recording equipment and taking electromagnetic readings throughout the monastery. The barrier between dimensions may already be thinning, he theorized, after reviewing his data. If your research is correct, we may be witnessing preliminary effects of the cycle's completion. Margot spent hours in the chapel, sometimes praying, sometimes simply sitting in silence. "I feel him," she confided to Florian one evening. "Luca. It's as if he's trying to reach through to us, but can't quite make the connection." 3 days before Pentecost, Florian woke in the middle of the night to find his room filled with a soft blue light. The air felt charged, like the moments before a lightning strike. The wooden crucifix Brother Luca had given him 13 years earlier hung on the wall, vibrating slightly, though there was no breeze. The following night, Margot reported a similar experience, waking to find her room illuminated, feeling a presence beside her bed that vanished when she fully woke. On the eve of Pentecost, Professor Hayes's equipment recorded massive electromagnetic spikes throughout the monastery, concentrated most strongly around the sealed prayer room in the east wing. And then, in the darkest hour before dawn on Pentecost Sunday, Brother Florian woke to a sound he had not heard in 13 years, the perfect harmonic chanting of 7 voices coming from behind the locked door of the east wing's prayer room. Beneath the door, golden light spilled into the corridor, pulsing with the rhythm of the chant. The heavy iron key turned in the lock with a reluctance born of 13 years of disuse. The door's ancient hinges protested as Brother Florian pushed it open, revealing the prayer room beyond. The golden light that had spilled beneath the door now filled the chamber with a warm radiance that seemed to originate from nowhere and everywhere at once. The room was exactly as it had been sealed 13 years earlier. Stone walls lined with wooden prayer benches, a small altar of carved granite at the far end, devotional icons hanging in niches along the walls. Dust covered every surface, undisturbed by time except for 7 clear paths leading from the door to the altar, and there, arranged in a perfect circle on the altar stone, lay 7 sets of Capuchin robes, the simple brown habits, rope belts, and leather sandals that had been the daily attire of the vanished monks. Each set was meticulously folded, positioned with such precision that the distance between them appeared to have been measured to the millimeter. "Impossible," Florian whispered, his voice barely audible even in the perfect silence of the room. He approached slowly, aware of Margot and Professor Hayes entering behind him. The robes showed no sign of 13 years' passage, no dust, no deterioration of fabric, no fading of color. They appeared as fresh as if they had been woven yesterday. "Were these here when the room was sealed?" Hayes asked, his academic detachment failing to mask his awe. "No," Florian replied firmly. "The room was empty except for the furniture. These weren't here." Margot moved forward as if in a trance, her hand outstretched toward one of the folded habits. "This was Luca's," she said with absolute certainty. "I recognize the repair I made to the sleeve when he tore it during his last visit home." Florian examined the nearest robe, recognizing the distinctive way Brother Matteo had always folded his garments, corners aligned with mathematical precision. Each habit, they soon discovered, bore some small identifying characteristic of its owner, a particular patch, a unique stitch pattern, a slight variation in fabric. "This isn't possible," Hayes muttered, the scientist in him warring with the evidence before his eyes. "This room has been locked and sealed for 13 years. The dust pattern shows no one has entered, Yet these garments are here, and they show no signs of aging. The seals were unbroken, Florian confirmed. I've checked them weekly since the disappearance. No one has entered this room. Then how? Hayes began. The same way they disappeared, Margot interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Whatever took them that day has returned their garments now. The discovery sent shockwaves through what remained of the monastery community. Brother Florian contacted the diocese, then reached out to Sheriff Rowan, now retired, but still living in the village. By noon, a small crowd had gathered in the monastery courtyard, former witnesses to the disappearance, local officials, and curious villagers drawn by rumors that spread like wildfire. Rowan, his hair now white but his skepticism undiminished, examined the prayer room with professional thoroughness. Could someone have picked the lock, replaced it afterward? He asked, inspecting the door mechanism. Impossible, Florian replied. The key has been in my possession continuously. The door wasn't just locked, it was sealed. He pointed to the remains of the wax seal that had joined door to frame, now broken by their entry, but clearly intact until that morning. Then someone found another way in, Rowan insisted, a hidden passage, a forgotten doorway. The walls are solid stone, Sheriff, Hayes interjected. I've conducted a complete architectural survey of this wing as part of my research. There are no secret passages. Throughout the day, various experts arrived to examine the prayer room and the mysterious robes. A textile conservator from the National Museum confirmed that the garments showed no signs of aging, an impossibility for wool fabric left untreated for 13 years. A forensic specialist found no fingerprints, fibers, or other evidence suggesting human entry into the sealed room. Most disturbing was the analysis of dust patterns on the floor. Fine powder had been spread across the threshold before the room was sealed in 1979, a security measure suggested by Sheriff Rowan at the time. That powder showed 7 sets of footprints leading from the altar to the door, but none leading in the opposite direction. As evening approached, Margot sat alone in the chapel, Brother Luca's folded habit cradled in her lap. Florian found her there, her expression torn between grief and hope. It's like touching a ghost, she said softly. So real, so present, yet it only emphasizes his absence. Perhaps it's a message, Florian suggested, sitting beside her in the pew, a sign that they're trying to reach back to us. As word spread beyond the village, the discovery attracted renewed media attention. By the following day, reporters had once again descended on Santa Vita, their cameras and questions disrupting the monastery's peace. The story spread across national news, reviving interest in the 13-year-old mystery. The village itself became divided once more. Some saw the appearance of the robes as divine intervention, a miracle confirming faith in the supernatural. Others suspected an elaborate hoax, perhaps orchestrated to revitalize the failing monastery. Heated arguments broke out in the local pub, old friendships strained by conflicting beliefs. 3 days after the discovery, Professor Hayes approached Florian with a theory that would alter their understanding of the mystery. I've been analyzing the electromagnetic readings from the prayer room, he explained, spreading charts across the refectory table. They show patterns consistent with theories of dimensional thresholds. Meaning? Florian asked. Meaning the monks may not have vanished in the sense we understood. They may have transitioned to another state of existence, one that overlaps with our own, but remains separate. A parallel dimension, if you will. You're suggesting they still exist? Margot asked, her voice barely containing her hope. In some form, Hayes clarified. The readings suggest periodic fluctuations in the barrier between dimensions, becoming most permeable at specific astronomical alignments. The 49-year cycle you identified, Brother Florian, appears to mark major threshold events, but there are minor permeability increases at 13-year intervals. That would explain why the robes have appeared now, Florian mused. Exactly, but there's more. Hayes adjusted his glasses nervously. The readings are continuing to intensify. If the pattern holds, we're approaching another threshold event, possibly large enough for more substantial transit between dimensions. Are you saying they could return? Margot asked, leaning forward intently. Or that we might see further manifestations, Hayes replied cautiously. Perhaps even communication across the barrier. That night, the phenomena intensified. Lights appeared throughout the monastery, floating orbs that moved with apparent purpose through corridors and rooms. The temperature fluctuated wildly, dropping to near freezing in some areas while rising uncomfortably in others. Every electronic device in the building malfunctioned, batteries draining instantly, recording equipment capturing only static. In the chapel, candles lit themselves, burning with flames of unusual colors: blue, green, violet. The ancient bell in the tower began to toll at midnight, though no one pulled its rope. By morning, news of the strange occurrences had spread through the village. Dozens gathered outside the monastery gates, some praying, others simply watching in fearful fascination. The local priest, Father Marconi, arrived to offer support and guidance, though he appeared as bewildered as everyone else. The church has procedures for investigating potential miracles, he explained to Florian. But this defies categorization. As the second night approached, Professor Hayes completed his analysis of the monastery's architecture, focusing on the prayer room where the robes had appeared. There's something unusual about the positioning of this room, he told Florian and Margot. It sits directly above the oldest part of the catacombs, and its dimensions follow the golden ratio exactly. The placement of the windows allows light to strike the altar only at specific times of year, corresponding to significant dates in the ancient calendar. The monks chose this room for their ritual deliberately, Florian realized. It wasn't random. Precisely. And I believe the altar itself may be key. The stone isn't local. It's a rare form of granite with unusual mineral properties. Tests show it has remarkable electromagnetic conductivity. As they spoke, the strange light beneath the prayer room door reappeared, stronger than before. This time, when they entered, they found the robes had changed position, no longer folded but laid out flat on the floor in a perfect circle around the altar. And on the altar stone itself, words had appeared, etched into the surface as if by intense heat. The threshold opens, the guardians return. Be ready. What do you think will happen next in our story? Share your theories below. The inscription on the altar sent Professor Hayes into a frenzy of research. The concept of guardians appears in multiple mystical traditions, he explained, surrounding himself with reference books in the monastery library. Beings who stand at the boundaries between worlds, maintaining the separation or facilitating controlled interaction. While Hayes delved into esoteric texts, Florian and Margot examined the robes more carefully. Under ultraviolet light, previously invisible markings became apparent, intricate symbols embroidered with thread that had been treated to fluoresce. These symbols match some found in Father Silvano's hidden manuscripts, Florian noted, comparing the glowing patterns to his notes. But they're more elaborate, more complete. Margot discovered another surprise while handling Brother Luca's robe. A small pocket had been sewn into the inner lining, containing several folded pages covered in her brother's distinctive handwriting. The pages had not been there during their initial examination. "These are addressed to me," she said, her voice catching as she read. "Dated yesterday." The letter began with an affirmation of love and regret for the pain Luca's absence had caused. It continued with explanations that challenged their understanding of reality. What we experienced as instantaneous was for us years of transition. Time flows differently across the threshold. We exist now as guardians of the passage between dimensions, neither fully in your world nor entirely separated from it. Our physical forms were transformed, but our consciousness remains. The Capuchin order has maintained this secret covenant for centuries. In each generation, 7 are chosen to make the crossing when the celestial alignment allows the threshold to open. We maintain the balance between realms that would cause catastrophic disruption if they fully merged. Now a greater alignment approaches, the completion of the 49-year cycle. The threshold will open more completely than at any time in the past century. We will attempt to manifest more fully, but others seek to use this opportunity for their own purposes. The symbols on our robes are protective sigils. Study them. They may be needed. The letter ended with instructions to search Father Silvano's untouched chambers for a specific volume hidden behind a false panel in his personal altar. They found the hidden compartment exactly as described. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with diagrams, mathematical calculations, and ritual instructions in Father Silvano's meticulous handwriting. "This is extraordinary," Hayes breathed as they examined the journal together. "It describes the covenant of the threshold in scientific as well as spiritual terms. According to these notes, the monks didn't just disappear. They underwent a transformation that allowed them to exist partially outside normal space-time." "But why?" Margot asked. "Why would they choose this?" "Because someone needs to stand guard," Florian realized, reading further. "The threshold between dimensions isn't just a doorway, it's a boundary that prevents catastrophic merging of realities that operate under different physical laws." As they pieced together the journal's information, supernatural phenomena continued to intensify throughout the monastery. Shadowy figures were glimpsed in corridors, their forms transparent yet recognizable as the missing monks. Objects moved without being touched. Voices echoed from empty rooms, speaking in languages both ancient and unknown. The most dramatic manifestation occurred 3 nights after the discovery of the robes. As Florian, Margot, and Hayes gathered in the refectory to compare notes, the temperature plummeted suddenly. Their breath clouded in the frigid air as the electric lights flickered and died, replaced by a soft blue luminescence that seemed to emanate from the stone walls themselves. In this ghostly light, a figure appeared, indistinct at first, then gradually solidifying into the form of Brother Matteo, the eldest of the missing monks. Though recognizable, his appearance was unsettling, his edges blurred slightly, and light seemed to pass partially through him. When he spoke, his voice resonated as if coming from everywhere at once. "The barrier thins," he said, his expression grave. "We cannot maintain separation much longer without completing the cycle." Before they could respond or question him, the apparition faded, leaving them in darkness until the electric light sputtered back to life moments later. The encounter spurred them to more urgent research. Hayes focused on decoding the mathematical formulas in Silvano's journal, which appeared to predict energy fluctuations at the threshold. Margot worked on translating coded sections written in an obscure dialect of Aramaic. Florian explored the symbolic connections between the altar's inscription and the sigils on the robes. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While searching Father Silvano's quarters for additional materials, Florian discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, containing correspondence between the abbot and his predecessors. These letters, dating back over a century, detailed the history of the covenant and its connection to the monastery's founding. Santa Vita wasn't built as an ordinary monastery, Florian explained, spreading the letters across the library table. It was constructed specifically to house the threshold, a natural weak point between dimensions that had been discovered by early Capuchin mystics. The entire architecture is designed to contain and regulate energy flows, Hayes added, connecting this information to his architectural survey. The chapel, the bell tower, even the placement of the gardens, they form a pattern that stabilizes the dimensional boundary. Margot made the final connection. Luca's letter mentioned protective sigils on the robes. I've been comparing them to symbols in the manuscripts, and they form a complete sequence, a key of sorts. Their collective research revealed the truth behind the 49-year cycle. At these intervals, cosmic alignments created maximum permeability between dimensions. During these periods, the guardians, those who had crossed over previously, could potentially return to physical form. Alternatively, the threshold could be sealed more permanently, preventing transition in either direction for the next cycle. The choice must be made during the alignment, Hayes concluded. Either the guardians return, relinquishing their role and requiring new guardians to take their place, or they reinforce the seal from their side, committing to another 49 years of service. As they absorbed this revelation, the monastery experienced its most dramatic phenomena yet. Throughout the night, the 7 spectral monks appeared simultaneously in different locations. Brother Jerome in the bell tower, Brother Vincent in the library, Brother Thomas in the garden, and others elsewhere. Though they could not yet interact physically, their forms had become clearer, more present. The following morning, Florian noticed a change in the prayer room. The stone floor around the altar had begun to reveal previously invisible markings, concentric circles inscribed with symbols matching those on the robes. As the sunlight struck these markings at a particular angle, the floor appeared to become transparent, revealing a hidden chamber beneath. There's something below the prayer room, Florian realized, something connected to the threshold itself. Using ground-penetrating radar borrowed from a local university, Hayes confirmed the existence of a chamber directly beneath the altar. It did not appear on any architectural plans, even those dating to the monastery's construction. "We need to find a way in," Margot insisted. "If what Luca wrote is true, the 49-year alignment will occur within days." They searched the prayer room meticulously, looking for any mechanism that might reveal an entrance to the hidden chamber. The answer came from Father Silvano's journal, a passage describing a key of 7 parts needed to unlock the path below. The ritual objects, Florian remembered suddenly, the items the monks were holding when they disappeared. Sheriff Rowan collected them as evidence, but they were returned to the monastery after the investigation closed. The objects had been stored in a locked cabinet in the abbot's study. The silver bell, the brass censer, the alabaster box, the carved wooden staff, the stone bowl, the crystal vial, and the ancient leather-bound book. When arranged on the altar in a specific pattern indicated by the floor markings, they fit perfectly into subtle depressions in the stone. With all 7 objects in place, the floor beneath the altar began to shift. Stone grated against stone as a section of the floor slid away, revealing a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. The hidden chamber awaited them below, a perfectly circular room with walls of unusually smooth stone. 7 alcoves were spaced evenly around the perimeter, each marked with symbols matching those on the monks' robes. In the center stood a raised platform of the same rare granite as the altar above, inscribed with a complex diagram that Hayes recognized from Silvano's calculations. "The threshold," he whispered in awe, "the actual junction point between dimensions." As they stood before this ancient secret, the monastery bell began to toll of its own accord, signaling that the final phase of the mystery was about to unfold. The bell's tolling resonated through the hidden chamber, causing the air to vibrate visibly. The diagram on the central platform began to glow with a blue-white luminescence, pulsing in rhythm with each bell tone. In the 7 alcoves around the perimeter, shadows deepened and coalesced, gradually taking on the forms of the missing monks. "They're trying to manifest," Hayes whispered, his scientific detachment giving way to wonder. "The alignment is strengthening their connection to our dimension." "We should bring down the robes," Florian suggested. Luca's letter implied they were important to the process. While Hayes remained to observe the phenomena, Florian and Margot hurried back up the spiral staircase to retrieve the 7 habits from the prayer room above. As they gathered the garments, Margot noticed additional pages had appeared in Brother Luca's hidden pocket, instructions for a ritual that would help the monks fully materialize. When they returned to the chamber below, the spectral forms of the monks had become more defined, though still partially transparent. Brother Matteo, his aged face now clearly visible, gestured toward the alcoves. "The robes," his voice echoed, "place them in the alcoves. They are anchors to your reality." Following his instruction, they placed each habit in its corresponding alcove, matching the symbols embroidered on the garments to those carved into the stone. As the last robe was positioned, the glowing diagram on the central platform intensified, shooting beams of light to each alcove. "The ritual," Margot said, unfolding Luca's instructions. "We need to recite these words while completing the diagram." The text was in the same ancient language the monks had chanted during the Pentecost service 13 years earlier. Hayes, Florian, and Margot positioned themselves around the platform, careful not to disturb the light beams connecting it to the alcoves. As they began the recitation, the monastery above them groaned as if under enormous pressure. Dust fell from the chamber ceiling, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. The spectral forms of the monks grew increasingly solid with each phrase of the ritual, their features becoming more distinct, their presence more tangible. When the final words were spoken, a surge of energy pulsed through the chamber. The light beams intensified to blinding brightness, then suddenly collapsed inward toward the central platform. A thunderous crack shook the foundation, and for a moment, time itself seemed to pause. Then silence. As their vision readjusted, they saw 7 figures standing in the alcoves, the missing monks, now fully corporeal. Their appearance had changed subtly. Though recognizable, they seemed somehow ageless, their eyes reflecting a depth of experience beyond normal human perception. Brother Luca stepped forward first, moving toward Margot with both hesitation and longing. When they embraced, his body felt solid, but unusually warm, humming with subtle energy. 13 years for you, he said softly. For us, it has been different. Time passes differently across the threshold. What happened to you? Margot asked, tears streaming down her face. Where have you been? Between, Brother Matteo answered, his voice now normal, though carrying new authority. We exist as guardians of the boundary between dimensions. Our consciousness expanded beyond physical limitation, allowing us to perceive and maintain the separation between realities that would destroy each other if fully merged. Brother Vincent approached Florian, smiling with recognition. You kept faith with us, brother. You maintained the monastery when others abandoned it. I needed to understand, Florian replied simply. And now you do, Brother Thomas said, addressing Hayes. Your research helped strengthen the connection. Your understanding of the threshold's scientific principles complemented our spiritual knowledge. Brother Matteo moved to the central platform, gesturing for the others to gather around. We have manifested physically for a brief window during this alignment. Soon, a choice must be made. He explained that the 49-year cycle had reached its culmination. The dimensional barrier had thinned to its minimum, creating 2 possibilities. The Guardians could return permanently to physical existence, requiring 7 new volunteers to take their place beyond the threshold, or they could return to their non-physical state and reinforce the barrier from the other side, committing to another cycle of guardianship. But there is a complication, Brother Jerome added gravely. Others have learned of the threshold, those who seek to exploit it for power rather than maintain the balance. The monks revealed that entities from other dimensions, beings with their own agendas and moral frameworks incompatible with human understanding, had begun probing the weakened barrier. Without proper guardianship, these entities could potentially cross over, with catastrophic consequences for our reality. If we choose to return to physical form, Brother Dominic explained, 7 others must take our place immediately. If not, the threshold will remain vulnerable until new guardians can be properly prepared, a process that takes years. Can't you simply return to your guardian state? Hayes asked. We can, Brother Gabriel replied, but the choice must be unanimous, and... He hesitated, looking at Brother Luca, who still held Margot's hand. And some of us have reasons to wish to return, Luca finished quietly. The revelation created a profound moral dilemma. The monks' desire to return to human existence after their long service was understandable. Yet the risk to humanity if the threshold remained unguarded was incalculable. As they deliberated, strange distortions began appearing around the edges of the chamber, rippling effects in the air that suggested the barrier was weakening further. Through these distortions, glimpses of something other became visible, geometries and colors that hurt the human eye to perceive, movements that followed laws of physics not recognized in our dimension. They're trying to cross, Brother Matteo warned, his expression grim. We're out of time. Brother Luca turned to Margot, his face reflecting both love and resignation. I wanted to stay, he said softly, to return to you, but the cost is too great. One by one, the other monks reached the same conclusion. Their duty as guardians outweighed their personal desires. They would return to their non-physical state and seal the threshold from the other side, preventing any unauthorized crossing for another 49 years. Wait, Florian said suddenly. Father Silvano's journal mentioned a third option, a way to strengthen the barrier permanently, reducing the need for constant guardianship. He retrieved the journal from where Hayes had left it on the chamber floor. The relevant passage described a ritual that could reinforce the dimensional boundary using the energy generated during the alignment itself. It would require all 7 of us channeling the threshold energy simultaneously, Brother Matteo said, after reviewing the text. The strain would be enormous. But if successful, Margot asked, the barrier would be strengthened significantly. Future breaches would be smaller, more manageable. Fewer guardians would be needed. The monks conferred briefly, then reached consensus. They would attempt the reinforcement ritual, potentially allowing some of them to return to physical existence while others maintained a reduced guardianship role. As they prepared for the ritual, Brother Luca spoke privately with Margot. I cannot promise I'll be able to return, he said, but if the ritual succeeds, there's a chance. Either way, know that my choice is made with both duty and love in my heart. The 7 monks took positions around the central platform, each standing before the alcove containing his robe. Following instructions from the journal, Florian, Hayes, and Margot retreated to the edge of the chamber, ready to assist if needed, but warned not to interfere once the ritual began. The monks joined hands, forming a circle around the platform. Their chanting began softly, then built in volume and complexity. The diagram beneath their feet responded, its glow intensifying until it seemed to consume them in brilliant light. The chamber shook violently as energy surged through the threshold. The distortions at the edges of the room twisted more aggressively, occasionally revealing glimpses of entities attempting to push through, forms that defied description, existing in more dimensions than human perception could process. At the ritual's crescendo, each monk became a conduit for massive energy flows. Their physical forms began to blur at the edges, partially merging with the light itself. Brother Matteo called out final instructions, his voice barely audible above the roaring energy. Then came the culmination, a deafening implosion as the energy collapsed inward, followed by an explosive pulse that knocked Florian, Hayes, and Margot to the ground. Darkness fell as the chamber's unearthly illumination vanished. When emergency lights flickered on moments later, the central platform stood empty. The distortions had vanished, the air now still and ordinary. In each alcove, the monks' robes lay once more folded neatly, with one exception. Brother Luca's alcove was empty. "Margot," a weak voice called from near the chamber entrance. There, leaning against the wall, was Brother Luca, fully physical, though clearly exhausted. "The ritual worked," he managed to say before collapsing into Margot's arms. The others? They remained as guardians, but fewer were needed. They insisted I return. In the days that followed, they pieced together what had happened. The reinforcement ritual had succeeded, strengthening the dimensional barrier significantly. 6 of the monks had chosen to remain as guardians, their combined power sufficient now that the barrier required less maintenance. As a parting gift to their youngest brother, they had channeled their collective energy to anchor Luca permanently in physical reality. Brother Luca's return to the world required adjustment. Officially dead for 13 years, his legal resurrection involved complicated explanations to authorities. Professor Hayes provided a scientific cover story involving amnesia and mistaken identity that satisfied official inquiries while preserving the threshold's secret. The hidden chamber was sealed once more, though not forgotten. Florian, now understanding his true purpose, remained at Santa Vita as its guardian and historian. With the diocese's approval, he established a small community of scholars dedicated to studying the threshold from a respectful distance, ensuring its protection for future generations. Margot and Luca eventually married, establishing a home near the monastery. Though no longer a monk, Luca retained a spiritual connection to his brothers beyond the threshold, occasionally receiving impressions or messages from them during meditation. Professor Hayes documented the entire experience in a private manuscript to be published only after his death. His mainstream academic work began incorporating subtle references to dimensional theory that would influence scientific thought for decades to come. The monastery itself underwent a renaissance. With modest funding from Hayes' academic connections, the buildings were restored and repurposed as a retreat center and library specializing in comparative mysticism. Visitors occasionally reported unusual experiences, glimpses of monks in the corridors, whispered chanting in empty rooms, brief sensations of time flowing differently in certain areas. 7 years later, Florian stood in the chapel during Pentecost service, now attended by a small but dedicated congregation. As sunlight streamed through the stained glass, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor, he felt rather than saw the presence of the 6 guardians, Brother Matteo, Vincent, Dominic, Thomas, Gabriel, and Jerome, observing from their dimension, separated yet connected. In that moment of awareness, Florian understood that the boundary between faith and knowledge, between science and mysticism, was as permeable as the threshold itself. Some mysteries were meant to be protected rather than solved, their truth revealed only to those prepared to understand their profound implications. Outside, Luca and Margot's young daughter played in the monastery garden, occasionally stopping to have animated conversations with invisible friends whom she described as the uncles who shine like light. Her parents exchanged knowing glances but asked no questions. Some connections transcended dimensional boundaries, linking past to future in ways that defied ordinary explanation. And deep beneath the prayer room, the threshold remained, a sacred junction between worlds, a reminder that reality was both more complex and more wondrous than most would ever know. If you're captivated by mysteries like this one, be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a comment below telling us where you're watching from.